The signal came from the black edge of space, a desperate cry for help that echoed across the stars. It was weak, broken, filled with static, but the terror in the alien voice was clear even through the distortion. To any who hear us, are under attack. We are dying. We need help. Please, if anyone can hear this, the message repeated over and over, carried on ancient frequencies that crossed light years before reaching the heart of Earth's deep space command. When the humans received it, they didn't answer right away. They just listened, in cold silence, watching the data streams, reading the reports, their faces carved from stone, in the war room beneath Earth's steel mountains. The old generals and admirals stood before flickering displays. Images of burning worlds, shattered cities, monstrous insectoid creatures swarming through alien streets. The creatures, like anything in human records, moved like a virus, consuming everything, leaving no survivors. The alien species sending... The distress call was unknown to most humans, fragile beings with soft skin and wide, terrified eyes. Their worlds were being wiped out in silence, one after another. No resistance had held. No diplomacy had saved them. The humans didn't move quickly. They didn't panic. They gathered the facts, measured the threat. And when they spoke, their voices were cold and controlled. "The enemy is biological in nature," one commander said softly. "Hive-based, rapid reproduction. Zero communication. No diplomatic channels." Another general, his face pale under harsh lights, added quietly, "Standard extermination model. They won't stop. They can't." The room fell. Silent. And then the final decision came, spoken with no hesitation. "Send a fleet." And just like that, the black engines of Earth's war machine roared to life. The first Terran fleet moved without announcement. There were no grand speeches, no media, no calls for unity, just cold action. The warships, black and sharp-like hunting knives, slipped silently from Earth's orbit, their engines burning bright as they vanished into the dark. On board those ships, the soldiers of Earthmen and women bred for war checked their weapons in silence. Their faces were calm, unreadable. They had been trained for this their entire lives, not for rescue, not for mercy, but for survival. And in the black corridors of the lead ship, the Revenant One man stood at the viewport, watching the stars slide past as the engines roared beneath his feet. Captain Elias Ward was not a man given to speeches. His eyes were cold, his face lined from decades of battlefield command. He knew what was waiting on the other side of the stars. He had seen it before, in different shapes, different forms, monsters, machines, alien armies. It was always the same. The universe was not a place of peace. It was a place of predators and prey. And humanity, despite all its scars, had learned one truth. You either stood up or you were wiped out. There was no in-between. The distress signals still echoed across the fleet's comm channels, playing on a loop. "Help us, please. We are being slaughtered. Anyone? Please respond." Some of the younger soldiers flinched as the voice repeated, but the veterans barely blinked. They had heard this kind of voice before, in other wars, on other burning worlds. Captain Ward listened in silence, then turned away. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. The Revenant dropped from faster than light into the target system. What they found was worse than the reports. The first planet hung broken in space. Surface blackened, oceans boiled away, cities shattered into dust. Massive swarms of insectoid creatures crawled across the land, building hives of flesh and bone, consuming the last remains of the alien species who had once called it home. In orbit, shattered defense platforms drifted like corpses. No resistance. No survivors. The Terran fleet locked weapons in silence. No orders for mercy were given. Ward's voice came low and cold. "Begin bombardment." The first human weapons screamed down through the void railgun slugs. Kinetic strikes, orbital. Lasers. The surface of the planet rippled with fire as the Terran fleet unleashed its full force. There were no warning shots, no attempts at communication. The insectoid enemy didn't respond to language, they responded to fire. And Earth gave them exactly that, down on the burning ground. The last pockets of surviving aliens, those who had begged for help, watched the skies with wide, stunned eyes as the heavens opened. The human weapons burned everything. Hive clusters shattered. Swarms disintegrated. Massive beasts larger than city blocks were vaporized where they stood. The insectoids fought back, but it made no difference. Against Earth's precision, they were nothing but dust. Hours later, when the bombardment ended, the planet was silent. Captain Ward stood at the viewport, his face blank. Enemy presence eliminated. A quiet voice reported from the bridge. Ward nodded. Status of survivors? Minimal, came the reply. Alien civilian numbers? Almost none. There was a pause, and then Ward gave the order without hesitation. Move to next system. The engines roared to life again. The fleet moved. The surviving aliens, those who had begged for help, stood in broken streets, staring up at the human warships as they vanished into the sky. Some whispered thanks, some wept, some simply collapsed. In the dust, but in the shadows of their minds, a new fear took shape, because what they had seen, what they had called upon, was not a savior, it was something else, something cold, something terrifying. And as the black Terran fleet vanished into the stars, every alien left behind whispered the same words in quiet dread. We asked the wrong species for help. The next system was worse. The Terran fleet emerged from faster than light into a sky filled with fire, a dying planet, burning oceans, shattering continents everywhere. The monstrous insectoid creatures had already spread like disease. The alien species who lived there, once peaceful, once thriving, had been reduced to scattered survivors running through the ruins of their cities. The enemy was everywhere, vast hives stretching across mountains and deserts, endless swarms in the air. And beneath the ground, it wasn't just an invasion, it was extermination. But this time, the humans had arrived before the last breath was taken. The black warships of Earth Sharp, Giller, cold hung in the sky like silent gods. They didn't rush. They didn't broadcast words of comfort. They simply observed, scanned, calculated, and when they moved, it was with terrifying precision. No wasted action, no hesitation. On the ground, the alien defenders, already broken by weeks of hopeless battle, watched in disbelief. They had heard the stories, the ancient rumors about the humans, the apex predators from the far side of the galaxy, but they had never seen them in action. They had never truly understood what it meant to call on Earth for help. Now, they understood. The Terran fleet opened fire. It wasn't just missiles or lasers. It was everything. Hypersonic railguns, kinetic strikes, plasma detonations that lit the sky like miniature suns. From orbit, the humans painted the battlefield with fire and metal. Every shot precise, every target calculated. The insectoid swarms that had seemed unstoppable disintegrated in moments. Hive towers collapsed into ash. Giant creatures, things the size of warships, were ripped apart mid-air, their twisted limbs falling like broken machines. The alien survivors could only watch in stunned silence as the impossible happened. The tide turned, and the humans didn't. Stop. Captain Elias Ward stood at the heart of the command deck aboard the Revenant, his cold eyes fixed on the tactical displays. The battlefield glowed in green and red, swarms vanishing under his fleet's relentless strikes. But his face showed no satisfaction, no pride. His voice remained flat. Status. Enemy retreating, came the quiet reply. Our loss is minimal. Ward's gaze didn't shift. Ground assault? Prepared, sir? He nodded once. Deploy. The next phase began. Human ground troops, armed to the teeth, descended in black dropships, engines roaring like thunder. They hit the surface hard, exiting in disciplined ranks.
Ow.
No hesitation, no mercy. These were not diplomats. These were not peacekeepers. These were Earth soldiers hardened by centuries of brutal survival, trained for one purpose only, to win. The insectoid creatures fought with savage desperation, but it was hopeless. The humans didn't just fight, they adapted. Every enemy tactic was met with immediate countermeasure. Every weak point was exploited. Plasma rifles cut down charging beasts. Heavy walkers crushed through hive lines. Drone swarms struck from above, laying waste to enemy formations. It wasn't a battle. It was slaughter. The alien refugees, who had survived this long huddled in shattered ruins, watching as the humans pushed the enemy back inch by inch. For the first time in weeks, the nightmare was ending. But as they watched the Terran soldiers silent, merciless, efficient, a new kind of fear took root in their hearts, because the humans didn't speak to them. They didn't comfort them. They moved past them like machines of war in one ruined city. An alien elder, her eyes hollow from loss, tried to speak to a passing Terran soldier. She raised her trembling hands, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you. Thank you for saving us." The human soldier didn't stop, his face hidden behind a black visor, his weapon raised, his eyes fixed ahead. He said nothing. No words. He moved on. The elder lowered her hands slowly. The feeling in her heart shifted. Gratitude, but also dread above them in orbit. Captain Ward continued the operation without pause. Hive clusters were located, mapped, and targeted for immediate extermination. No prisoners, no study, no mercy. Every single trace of the enemy was to be wiped from existence, and slowly the tide of war began to turn across the galaxy. Images spread. The first glimpses of Terran firepower, the cold precision of their soldiers, the utter absence of hesitation. Billions watched, breath held, as the reports came in. The humans were winning. The unstoppable swarms were falling. Planet after planet was being taken back. Survivors were being saved. But beneath the surface of those reports, another story. Grew. Whispers. Fears. The question no one dared speak aloud: had the galaxy called on the wrong species for help? Because the humans weren't acting like saviors. They were acting like something else entirely. In the council chambers of distant worlds, alien leaders argued late into the night. Some praised Earth's intervention. Others whispered dark warnings. "They fight too well," one said in a hushed voice. "They do not show anger. They do not show compassion. This is something else." On war-torn colony worlds, refugees began to murmur the same thing. "We're alive. But what have we unleashed?" And through it all, the humans gave no answer. The Black Fleet moved from one system to the next, crushing the enemy without mercy. On board the warships, no one spoke of victory. The soldiers did not celebrate. The commanders did not smile. They simply prepared for the next battle, and the next, because Earth had learned long ago. Survival was not built on kindness, it was built on fire. The Revenant's engines roared to life as the fleet departed the second system, leaving behind ashes and broken hives. The alien survivors gathered, heads tilted to the skies, watching the human ships vanish. Some wept in relief. Others shivered in terror and in the silence that followed. Only one truth remained. The galaxy had called for help, and now it could not take it back. The third world was different. This time, the enemy wasn't waiting in the shadows. It was already there, swarming the skies, covering the ground, tearing through what remained of the alien defenses. The creatures twisted things of bone, chitin. An endless hunger moved like rivers of flesh, devouring everything in their path. And above them, for the first time, the humans arrived not just to observe, but to meet the swarm face to face. The Terran fleet dropped from faster than light into a nightmare. Fires burned across continents. The last pockets of resistance, small alien armies armed with outdated weapons, were being overrun in real time. The distress signals were frantic, hopeless. "We cannot hold, cannot," the transmission. Cut off in static, Captain Elias Ward stood on the command deck of the Revenant, his face carved from stone. His eyes cold focus did not blink as the images of slaughter played out across the tactical screens. He had seen this before, in different forms, on different worlds. But always the same truth. When the monsters came, when diplomacy failed, only fire decided the outcome. "Deploy ground teams," he said softly. The order rippled through the fleet without ceremony. Dropships launched in black formation, engines burning as they descended into the atmosphere. Inside, Terran soldiers sat in silence-armored figures with expressionless helmets, weapons held tight, hearts steady. They didn't speak of fear. They didn't speak of hope. They were professionals, killers born from the hardest lessons Earth had ever learned: never show weakness. No. Never wait for mercy. The dropships cut through smoke and clouds, touching down on burning ground where the last alien defenders were making their final stand. It wasn't much of a defense. The insectoid enemy, 10 times the numbers, swarming without end, was already tearing through bunkers, ripping through trenches. The air was filled with screams, both alien and mechanical, as entire defensive lines were swallowed alive. The insectoids didn't negotiate. They didn't pause. They consumed. And then the humans arrived. The first shots from the Terran squads lit the battlefield in sudden, blinding violence. Plasma rifles roared. Drone swarms deployed overhead, targeting the largest enemy creatures with surgical strikes. Heavy mechs, massive, towering walkers, stomped across ruined fields, twin autocannons spitting fire. The alien survivors crouched in hopeless terror, blinked through the smoke as the impossible happened. The swarm was pushed back. The humans fought. Differently. They didn't scream. They didn't panic. Every movement was precise, calculated, efficient. When a soldier fell, another stepped forward without pause. When a new hive emerged from underground tunnels, the Terran gunships obliterated it before it could grow. Humans adapted in seconds. Every new threat was analyzed, dissected, and destroyed. One alien officer, a battered commander with 4 arms and bloodied skins, stared in disbelief as the Terran soldiers advanced. Who are they?" he whispered. No one answered. But the truth was already clear. They had called on the wrong species for help. Captain Ward watched from orbit, his voice quiet. "Report? Ground teams advancing? Swarm collapsing under pressure," came the reply. Ward's cold eyes flicked across the data streams. "Enemy adaptation? Minimal? They're too primitive to adjust fast enough?" Ward's fingers tapped the console. He nodded once. "Continue." Down below, the human lines pressed forward. The battlefield, once a slaughterhouse, became a different kind of nightmare. The insectoid enemy, designed by evolution for endless war, had never encountered anything like the Terrans. It wasn't just the weapons. It was the mindset, the refusal to break, refusal to stop. The alien survivors, their numbers dwindling, fell back to shattered bunkers. Some wept, some prayed, and some simply stood frozen, watching in numb silence as the black-armored soldiers of Earth cut through the swarm like blades through water. One, Leona, young soldier, barely more than a child, whispered in awe, "They're not afraid. They don't even look at the enemy." Another, an older officer, shook his head. "They're not here for us. They're here to end this, no matter the cost." And he was right. Hours passed. The last of the insectoid hives crumbled under relentless fire. Massive queen beasts, twisted towers of flesh, were incinerated from orbit. The skies cleared. The ground, once covered in writhing creatures, was still. Smoke drifted across fields of ash. And above it all, human flagships hung silent. The battle was over, but the fear had just begun. The alien survivors gathered in ruined plazas, too broken to cheer, too exhausted to speak. And as they looked up at the black shapes of the Terran, ships in the sky, a terrible thought settled in every heart. What happens when these humans decide we're next? Captain Ward gave the final command without emotion. "Begin up teams, begin extraction, prepare for redeployment." His officers obeyed. No celebration, no applause, just the quiet. Cold machinery of war moving forward to the next battlefield. Back in the alien capital, whispers spread like wildfire. The images of Earth's soldiers, faceless, ruthless, unstoppable, burned into every mind. Some called them saviors. Some called them monsters. But all agreed on one thing: the galaxy would never be the same again. In distant council chambers, Alien leaders gathered in secret. Some begged to send gifts, messages of gratitude. Others warned to stay silent, to not draw attention. One elder, her voice shaking, spoke the words none of them wanted to hear. We have woken something we cannot control. And the others, even the most powerful among them, said nothing, because they knew it was true. Far above, the Terran fleet prepared to move again. The engines of the Revenant rumbled softly as the next coordinates were locked in. The stars stretched. Ahead, cold and endless, and the humans. The humans were just getting started. The swarm didn't stop, even after the first victories. After the Terran fleet shattered the enemy on 2 worlds, the insectoid creatures adapted in their mindless more numbers, more hives, more endless waves of claws and teeth, and the galaxy, now watching every moment of the unfolding war, realized the horror wasn't over. It was growing. Every hour. Every breath. The call for help that had once been whispered by a few desperate voices now echoed from a dozen species. A dozen. Burning colonies, as the swarm spread across entire sectors, devouring without end. And Earth answered, but this time. They didn't send 1 fleet. They sent 5. Massive black warships. Cruisers carriers emerged across multiple systems. No banners, no warnings, just cold steel and readiness. Every ship moved with the same purpose: eliminate the threat. And for the first time, the galaxy saw the real face of Terran warfare, not rescue, not defense, but pure calculated annihilation. The humans weren't fighting to save the galaxy. They were fighting to end a threat, permanently, on the ruined colony of Velenfor. The insectoid swarms surged through burning cities as the first wave of human reinforcements descended from orbit. But this time, it wasn't just soldiers. This time, Earth unleashed its true arsenal. Massive, mechanized walkers towering machines of iron and plasma touched down, shaking the ground with every step. Artillery crawlers deployed their guns, glowing hot as they fired precision strikes into hive clusters miles away. Drone swarms thickened the sky, guided by cold artificial intelligence that calculated every movement, every weakness, every opportunity to kill. And above them all, the orbital guns never stopped firing. From a distant ridge, the few remaining. Alien soldiers watched with wide, haunted eyes. They had begged for help weeks ago, months ago, ever dreaming what would come. One officer, her voice shaking, whispered as the sky burned red, "We asked for saviors. They sent us monsters." No one answered. Because in the ruins of the battlefield, the line between savior and destroyer was gone. On the bridge of the Revenant, Captain Elias Ward moved from station to station, his expression unchanged. The reports came in without emotion. Enemy hive eliminated grid delta. Casualty rates minimal. Planetfall complete. Next phase initiated. Ward's eyes didn't flicker. "Push forward," he said softly. No pause, no mercy. The enemy, mindless, overwhelming, kept coming. The insectoid creatures poured from deep tunnels, birthed in twisted hives, millions upon millions. But the Terrans adapted faster. Every time the swarm found a new tactic, the humans responded with brutal surgical efficiency. Portable shield systems, adaptive ammunition, heat-based biodisruptors that melted flesh and bone in seconds. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't meant to be. The galaxy watched in silence as broadcast. Images from the front lines spilled across every known world. The insectoid swarm, once an unstoppable nightmare, was being driven back system by system. But the images of the Terrans struck a different chord. Black-armored soldiers who didn't speak, who didn't celebrate, who didn't mourn. Ships that fired without warning. Machines that moved without hesitation. And when the battles ended, the humans didn't linger. They didn't rebuild. They left behind ashes and broken soil, then moved on. On the political worlds, in the cold chambers of the council, fear spread like wildfire. The ambassadors, the same ones who had once dismissed Earth as primitive, emotional, unpredictable now, sat in stunned silence. The galaxy's oldest powers, species that had dominated for centuries, were forced to admit the truth. They had underestimated humanity, and now they couldn't stop what they had unleashed. "We must talk to them," one ambassador whispered, his voice barely audible. "We must ask them to show restraint." But another, an older voice, replied coldly, "They don't hear words, they hear actions, and we're too late." Back on Velenfor, the last hive fell under human fire. The insectoid, queen-towering, grotesque, monstrous, was obliterated by an orbital strike that cracked the ground for miles. The remaining enemy creatures, leaderless, mindless, were hunted down without pity. Not a single one was spared. And when it was done, when the smoke cleared, Captain Ward gave the order to move again. No celebration. No relief. Just cold readiness. In a shattered bunker, a small group of rescued aliens knelt in silence, staring up at the sky where the Terran ships still glowed like black stars. One of them, a young soldier whose family had been wiped out, whispered softly, "They saved us." Another, older and wiser, shook his head. "No," he murmured. "They saved themselves. We were just in the way." The survivors said nothing. More, they understood. The galaxy, still burning in distant places, now understood too. This wasn't just war. This wasn't just survival. This was escalation. And the humans weren't finished yet. The war was no longer a distant threat. It was everywhere. Across burning worlds and dying colonies, the swarm kept spreading, mindless and endless. A living wave of destruction. But this time, the galaxy wasn't watching helplessly. This time, black Terran warships filled the skies, and wherever humanity arrived, the swarm died. The message was clear. Earth would not let this enemy survive. The humans had escalated. And now, they were unleashed in orbit above the planet Javelin Prime. Entire human fleets stretched across the darkness, rows of silent black warships armed with weapons the galaxy had only heard of in rumors. Planet crackers, nanite storms, kinetic cannons that could shatter continents. And below them, on the ground, Earth's soldiers prepared for the most brutal assault yet. Captain Elias Ward stood on the hardened deck of the Revenant. His cold eyes locked on the screens before him. Data flickered. Enemy positions marked in red. Hive clusters spread across the planet's equator, like tumors. The swarm was thicker, here larger, more aggressive. But Ward's voice never shifted. Az's command was calm. "Deploy everything." And they did. The first wave hit like the fist of a god. Orbital cannons lit the sky. Explosions ripped through the atmosphere, fire raining down on alien soil. The swarm, sensing the assault, responded with every twisted creature it could, birth miles long. Insect leviathans, massive queen hives, rivers of skittering bodies. But the Terrans didn't blink. They came in hard and fast. Massive human dropships tore through the clouds, carrying armored divisions, heavy walkers, and black-clad soldiers armed with weapons to advance, too brutal for anything the swarm could match. Plasma cannons, sonic disruptors, flame units that turned entire valleys into oceans of fire. The humans pushed forward, and every step was carved through blood and ashdot from the shattered towers of a half-dead alien city. What remained of the original inhabitants watched in horror and awe. The swarm had slaughtered millions here, destroyed families, burned homes, consumed entire nations. But the humans were something else. They didn't scream. They didn't curse. They moved like machines of war, cold and relentless, as if nothing, no horror, no loss, could touch their hearts. One alien elder, her voice barely more than a whisper, clutched her trembling hands as she watched the battlefield from afar. "They will not stop," she murmured. "Not until nothing is left." And she was right. The Terrans pressed deeper. The swarm fought with desperation, but it was already too late. Every hour brought new firepower, new tactics, new weapons from Earth's cold arsenals. Swarm hives fell one by one, incinerated by orbital strikes or leveled by ground teams who left no survivors in one valley once green. Now scorched black, Captain Ward personally observed the assault. His boots crunched over ash as the last hive creature collapsed in front of him, its massive body still twitching. His soldiers' black-armored faces hidden stood silently around him. Weapons ready, breath steady. Ward spoke softly into his. Comes all hive clusters in this sector, neutralized. Move forward. There was no celebration, no flag raised, no words of victory, just movement. Cold, efficient. The next target already in their sights, back in orbit. Human ships launched waves of automated drone silent killers that swept through enemy tunnel networks, exterminating every last trace of the insectoid threat. Whole regions were sterilized from space. Biochemical weapons tailored specifically for the enemy's DNA were released into the atmosphere, ending what few creatures remained in the dark places underground and the galaxy. The galaxy watched billions of eyes across hundreds of species stared in breathless horror as the broadcasts came through. Not from the humans who never sent messages, but from survivors. From terrified refugees who whispered the truth the galaxy could no longer deny. The humans don't just win wars, they erase them. In the council chambers of distant worlds, the alien leaders met in emergency sessions. Some demanded immediate communication, with Earth begging for negotiation. Others argued in fear, warning that interference might provoke the Terrans into turning their weapons on the very species they had come to save. One voice. An old diplomat from a peaceful water world spoke the words no one wanted to hear. His hands trembled as he addressed the silent room. We thought we were calling for heroes, but we have summoned something far worse. The humans are not like us. They are not like anything. And the others, even those who still clung to fragile hope, said nothing, because deep down they all knew it was true. Back on Javelin Prime, the last great hive fell beneath the weight of human firepower. The ground itself cracked, the skies darkened, and in the silence that followed, only the distant thunder of Terran war machines remained. The human soldiers' faces hidden behind. Cold visors stood in the ash as the wind carried the last traces of the enemy into the black sky. Some of them glanced upward, to the stars. Others simply reloaded, checked their weapons, and waited for the next order, because for them, this wasn't the end. It was only the middle. Captain Ward gave the final command without hesitation. Clean up teams. Begin planetary sweep. Next jump coordinates. And just like that, the Terran fleet moved again. No victory speech, no medals, no names, just cold silence. And in every corner of the galaxy, the fear spread deeper than the swarm itself. The fear that the humans, these creatures of steel and flame, might never stop, and worse still, that one day they might turn their eyes not toward monsters, but toward the rest of the galaxy itself. The swarm was dying. One world after another, one hive after another, broken, erased. The Terran war machine had rolled across the stars like a silent storm, leaving behind only silence, ash, and shattered bones. The insectoid creatures that had once seemed endless were now scattered, leaderless, desperate. But the humans didn't stop. They never stopped, in the cold emptiness above the burning planet of Threxus. The black ships of Earth hung in formation, of silent killers, armed with weapons that could split mountains and melt oceans. Below them, the ground was already scorched. Hive clusters lay in twisted ruins. The air itself burned, and yet the humans moved forward step by step, without hesitation. Inside the war room of the Revenant, Captain Elias Ward stood still, his expression carved from ice. The reports came in, dozens of hives eliminated, millions of enemy bioforms destroyed. The alien allies, those who had once called Earth for help, had begun sending messages, pleading for restraint. They begged for negotiations, for an end to the extermination. They spoke of mercy, but Ward's cold eyes didn't blink. "Mercy?" he murmured. "We're beyond mercy." The command was simple. No prisoners. Total annihilation. And the fleet obeyed on the ground. Terran soldiers in black armor moved through the burning forests and shattered cities, their weapons always ready, their faces hidden. The insectoid creatures, what few remained, were hunted down without pity. Even the smaller ones, the juvenile forms that posed no immediate threat, were targeted. The humans didn't distinguish between soldier and brood. To them, it was one thing: infestation. And infestations had to be burned out completely in a ruined alien village once home to tens of thousands. Fragments of the local species still survived. Scattered families, trembling civilians, huddled in the ruins as the Terran soldiers passed through. They had begged Earth for salvation. They had dreamed of rescue, but what they saw now chilled them to the core. The soldiers never spoke, never offered comfort. They moved like machines, cold and tireless, pushing forward toward the next hive, the next target, the next kill. In the distance, the roar of orbital cannons shattered the air as another hive cluster was vaporized in blinding light. The ground shook, the sky glowed red, and still the humans advanced. One alien survivor, a young child clutching the lifeless body of a parent, stared up as a Terran soldier passed. The soldier didn't look down, didn't pause. His steps were steady, his weapon ready, his heart untouched. The child's whispered words drifted into the wind. "They don't see us." And in truth, they didn't. Because this was no longer a rescue. This was extermination. Above, in the war room, another message came through, this time from the Galactic Council itself. The highest-ranking ambassadors, voices filled with panic, pleaded for Earth to cease the offensive. They spoke of peace talks, of rebuilding, of diplomacy. Captain Ward didn't answer. He turned to his officers, his voice low and even. Begin. Final phase. The humans unleashed their greatest weapons. Planet-Cracker's vast orbital devices designed to shatter tectonic plates descended from the Terran flagships. Each one targeted the heart of the remaining hive clusters, each one timed to erase entire regions in seconds. The weapons were not built for balance. They were built for finality. In minutes. The last of the insectoid hives on Threxus were gone. The planet, once green, once alive, was reduced to ash and molten glass, and still, the Terran fleet didn't slow. In the distant shadows of the Galactic Council, the alien leaders broke into chaos. Some demanded immediate diplomatic action. Others screamed for retreat. And in the darkest corners, the oldest voices spoke the fear that no one wanted to hear. "We have awakened a sleeping monster. They will not stop. We will be next." By then, it was too late. On Threxus, as the last fires burned, the surviving alien refugees gathered in silence. Some knelt, some wept, but all of them watched the black Terran ships as they rose back into the sky, cold, unblinking, merciless. They had begged Earth for help, and Earth answered, but not with kindness, not with mercy, with fire, with finality, Captain. Ward stood on the command deck as the engines roared beneath his feet, the stars stretching before him. His voice was steady, his orders clear. Set course for the next system. The fleet moved, and across the galaxy, the whispers spread like wildfire. The stories of black ships, faceless soldiers, unstoppable weapons. The rumors of worlds burned to nothing, of enemy species erased without pause, and the questions spoken. In terror, in dread, in awe, hung over every world: who will stop the humans? And in the cold heart of space, as Earth's fleet pressed onward, the silent answer echoed in the dark: no one. The galaxy was changing. Word spread faster than light. The swarm was dying, but so was something else: hope. The insectoid threat that had once devoured planets without mercy was now running, hiding, vanishing before the Terran war machine. But with every world the humans saved, something colder, darker, began to take root in the minds of the survivors. Fear, not of the swarm. Not anymore. Fear of the ones who had come to save them. The black ships of Earth hung above another burning world, motionless, cold, silent. Dozens of them, engines glowing softly as they rained fire on the last swarm strongholds. Below, the planet screamed, oceans boiled, cities crumbled, hives exploded in violent clouds of flame. The humans moved through it all like machines, without emotion, Without hesitation, Captain Elias Ward stood on the command deck of the Revenant. His face like stone, the reports flowed in, one after another, cold and clinical. Enemy position neutralized. Hive Elf eliminated. Civilian zones uninhabitable. Ward's voice never changed. Continue.
Yeah.
The planet beneath them was called Hasgar 3. Another colony, another desperate plea for help, another world too weak to defend itself. But by the time the humans arrived, the swarm had already buried deep into the ground, covering cities and forests in a sea of twisted life. No other force in the galaxy could have stopped it. Only Earth, and Earth had come. The first Terran dropships. Touchdown in fire and dust, deploying armored divisions of black armored soldiers. Behind them came the heavy walkers, the mechanized drones, the siege weapons, every machine built for one purpose only: extermination. The swarm rose to meet them in numbers too vast to count. Rivers of chitin, wings, claws, teeth, alien defenders those who had survived the first wave watched in breathless terror, certain that even Earth couldn't win this time. But the Terrans didn't blink. The first volleys ripped through the enemy ranks like thunder. Plasma detonations lit the night sky. Railguns split creatures the size of towers. Orbital lasers swept the battlefield clean. The swarm pushed forward with desperation, but it made no difference. The humans pressed back with cold precision, step by step, shot by shot. One alien soldier, a young officer barely alive, stared in disbelief as the Terrans advanced without fear. His voice cracked as he whispered, "They don't stop. They don't break." Beside him, an older commander answered with hollow eyes, "They're not fighting to survive. They're fighting to finish it." They were right. Hours turned. 2 days, the battle raged, but the outcome never changed. The swarm died. The humans lived. And when the last hive fell, when the final queen burned under Terran guns, the soldiers didn't cheer. They simply regrouped, reloaded, moved on. The alien survivors, frail, exhausted, broken, stood in the ruins of their cities, watching the silent Terran troops pass by. No words, no comfort. Just cold, faceless helmets and weapons that never lowered. A child, her eyes wide with fear, whispered to her mother, "Are they heroes?" The mother pulled her close, her voice barely a breath. "I don't know." Above, the Terran fleet prepared for departure. Captain Ward's eyes flicked across the data streams. Another world cleared, another system ready for the next operation. His voice was calm. "Begin withdrawal. Set course." But even as the engines ignited, even as the fleet moved onward, something shifted. A message. Not from the Council. It's not from the survivors. From the swarm. The impossible happened. For the first time since the war began, the insectoid creatures, the mindless, the savage, sent a signal. Crude, primitive, but unmistakable. It wasn't words. It wasn't sound. It was something deeper. Frequency. Thought. The humans intercepted it in silence. And for the first time, even Captain Ward paused. "Analysis," he ordered. His voice sharp. The AI systems worked in cold precision, scanning the alien signal. Decoding fragments, searching for meaning. What emerged was simple, terrifying. A single idea. Buried beneath layers of alien mind-structure. "We surrender." The words burned across the screens. The officers stood frozen. Captain Ward's face did not change. His hands rested on the steel rail, eyes fixed on the stars. "They're surrendering," one officer said quietly. Disbelief in her voice. Ward's reply came soft, cold. "The swarm doesn't understand surrender," another officer added, voice shaking. "Sir, what if they've evolved? What if they've learned?" For a moment, the bridge was silent, and then Ward spoke, his words low, final. "Continue the operation." The fleet didn't stop. The soldiers didn't pause. And somewhere, deep in the ruins of Hasgar 3, the last remnants of the alien swarmed, those who had once known nothing but hunger huddled in silence. Their primitive minds somehow aware of one truth. It wasn't the swarm the galaxy should have feared. It was the humans. The end came quietly. No final battle, no grand speeches, just silence, broken only by the cold hum of Terran engines moving through the blackness of space. As warm the nightmare that had consumed entire sectors was no more. Its last hives were ash. Its creatures, once countless, were nothing but dust scattered. Across dead worlds, the humans had won. But victory didn't bring peace. Above the shattered remains of the last infected planet, the Terran fleet hung motionless, rows of black warships, their hulls scarred from countless battles, engines burning faintly against the dark. On the ground below, nothing lived. The insectoid creatures had been wiped out completely. Every trace, every egg, every hidden nest, every whisper of life destroyed. Captain Elias Ward stood alone on the command deck of the Revenant, his face pale under the cold lights. The screens before him showed nothing but static. No more enemy signals. No more desperate distress calls. Just emptiness. "Status," he said softly. An officer's voice replied quietly. "Sector clear. No remaining biosignatures." Ward's hands rested on the steel railing. His eyes did not move. He had imagined this moment once, when the swarm was gone, when the galaxy was safe again. But now, standing in the cold glow of the dead world below, he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just the weight of silence. "Begin withdrawal." Ward ordered at last. The command rippled through the fleet. Engines roared to life. Warships adjusted course. And one by one, the Terran vessels began to slip away from the scarred battlefield, leaving behind only the silence of the grave. But in the distant corners of the galaxy, the fear did not fade. Because the survivors, those few alien species who had called for Earth's help, had not forgotten what they had witnessed. They remembered the cold, faceless soldiers who never spoke, who never hesitated. They remembered the black warships that rained fire without warning, without mercy. They remembered the ground shaking as entire planets were wiped clean, and they whispered the same truth: the humans had saved them. But the cost was too high. On distant political worlds, hidden council chambers, the conversations grew darker. Some spoke of gratitude, offering gifts, treaties, desperate words of thanks. But others, the older voices, the wiser, warned that something far worse had been unleashed. "We asked the wrong species for help," one diplomat whispered, his voice trembling. "We called the wolves into the fold." Across the stars, others nodded, because the humans were still moving. Their fleets no longer fighting, the swarm had begun to patrol in silence. Weapons still armed, soldiers still ready. The war was over, but the Terrans had not stood down. They had not relaxed. They remained cold, watchful in one burned-out village. Far from any surviving city, an alien child sat alone beneath the broken sky. She clutched a melted toy in her hands and watched the human ships disappear into the distance. Her eyes were wide not with relief, but with something else, fear above her. The stars stretched forever, cold, silent, and somewhere in that darkness, the Terran fleet moved onward, engines burning like distant embers. "On the Revenant, Captain." Ward's eyes flickered once toward the stars ahead. His voice was soft, barely audible. "Next mission?" The AI replied without pause. "No new assignments, sir. Enemy threat eliminated, standing by." Ward didn't speak for a long time, his breath slow, his expression empty. Then at last he whispered, "Prepare the fleet." No one questioned the order, no one asked for mercy. The war was over. But the humans, those quiet predators from the far side of the galaxy, were not finished. And across the galaxy, the whispers never stopped. The humans had come. They had answered the call for help, and they had changed everything forever.